Hello, my name's Clement and I'm a practicing barrister in employment law. One of the benefits and pleasure that I have from doing my job is that I get to meet a lot of interesting people, whether it be employees, employers, entrepreneurs, directors, CEOs. One person is Ruby Thomas, who's an HR manager in a company based in the northeast of England. To commemorate International HR Day 2024, we met and put together this podcast. I hope you enjoy it. So tell me, how did you get into HR?
It was one of those things I sort of fell into rather than had a burning desire to do. And I had been an office manager in lots of small companies where there was no HR department, so you deal with HR issues, you hire people, fire people, and deal with the day-to-day issues. And then eventually I was in a company where we outsourced HR. We'd had some really poor advice, and so the MD at the time suggested I get qualified and have some formal qualifications, and the rest is history. That was probably around 20 years ago.
And when you say qualified, qualified with whom?
The CIPD. So I did my level 5 and I've subsequently done my level 7 courses.
Right. Now, I've worked with a lot of HR professionals, and one of the things that I've had trouble with is trying to define in a sentence or so what HR does, or the full remit of HR. Can you sum up what HR does in one sentence?
Absolutely no way. I think it's one of those resources that covers so many areas that it's impossible to say we are just the hirers and firers. Many roles cover recruitment. During the course of undertaking HR duties, you become a counsellor, you become a mediator, you become a coach in some instances with managers who are unable to do the job at the level they need to be when it comes to managing people. And those things are just not recognised. They're not things you're taught to do. They're not things that are covered on the courses you do. You learn it and you are a practitioner. You practice and you learn as you go. There's no definitive course that will say this is the variety of things you come across like you would if you're in finance, for example.
Right, so putting you on the spot, what would be your typical day?
And that's another problem, you don't know. I could come in and think, right, I'm going to run some reports on attendance, and then within 10 minutes a manager comes in and said I need to sack somebody because they've just smacked somebody in the face, and then suddenly your day goes to pot because everything you plan to do goes out the window to deal with this incidents.
Right, so do you deal with induction? And if you do, what does that entail?
Yes, so again, the company I'm currently working for has a very thorough induction plan, but from the moment you recruit somebody, you put a plan in place. So it's who are they working for, how do they need to be set up, liaise with the departments, get the contracts in place, put the learning plan in place, make sure they know what day they're arriving, and all the communication that goes with that.
Right. I'm very much interested in employment law, as you know. How is that covered within HR, in your opinion?
I don't think it is. I think on the courses, the CIPD level 5 has a HR law employment law module, and it was 3 days with a lawyer. But I know that's very exceptional, and I was very lucky that I had access to that. But I think it's very much you have to do your own research. You have to read case law. You have to know what's coming through, what legal changes are coming through. So you're constantly keeping up because things change all the time. And this April there were a lot of changes came through, but they're coming up all the time.
I'm very much interested in diversity awareness and inclusion. How is that part of your practice, if at all?
Yeah, it's something we're very keen on. I think it's definitely something every employer needs to do, and we do training. We have mandatory training, we have classroom training every year, so everybody has to undertake at least one online course, and we do one face-to-face course for everybody's mandatory.
And what about things like disciplinary and grievance? Just take me through, how would you deal with that as an organisation? So let's deal with grievance first. So someone comes in and raises a complaint. How do you generally treat that complaint?
Again, with grievance, it's difficult to say because some might come in and say somebody said this to me, and it's relatively minor. There's no discrimination, so there's no harassment involved, And we usually say, how do you want to deal with it? Do you want us to have a quiet word with somebody? Do you want to report it? Do you want to escalate it? And it's very much about how they want to deal with it, because they lead on that. Obviously, if it was harassment in any way, it would be automatic. We would take over and we'd run an investigation, but it would ultimately depend on what the person, unless it was harassment, wanted to do with that complaint.
Right, I see. And with disciplinary, a common complaint that I receive from various clients is consistency or lack of consistency when there's a large organisation. So one manager may be faced with a set of facts and think it's an oral warning. Another manager faced with the same set of facts, as it were, we might think it's a final written warning, and another might find it's a summary dismissal. How do you as HR deal with such a difficult problem?
That's about HR offering advice without influencing the outcome of the process. You, as HR, you're generally involved in all the disciplinary meetings. You can have an adjournment and where a manager might feel it's dismissal, say, well, actually, in another department with the same parameters, we didn't dismiss, we gave a warning. So you do have some form of consistency. So we're not there to tell them what to do, we're there to offer advice and advise what's happened elsewhere. So hopefully there is consistent sanctions given.
Right. A common practice that I've noticed recently is that you would see in contracts of employment that if someone is got less than 2 years service, they can be dismissed without following a disciplinary procedure, the company disciplinary procedure, and also not entitled to an appeal. What's your view on that?
We would probably not do a disciplinary process, but we would certainly advise them that they were having a meeting that might result in their dismissal. We'd give them the reasons, the right to reply, and the right to be accompanied, because it's good practice to do so.
And do you have exit interviews?
We do, yes. We do with people that have resigned, not with people we dismiss because we know the reason they've left and they're unlikely to be giving us a good review or saying anything positive at that point.
And why do you have exit interviews? What's the benefit of having that in your view?
So we can collect information on, sometimes we can't always beat money, which is the ultimate reason why people go, and as sort of a relatively small company we don't have progression opportunities. But if there are other reasons why people are consistently going, for example, whether it's to do with a manager or whether it's a bullying culture that we've become unaware of, it gives you the opportunity to pick up things that we have been unaware of, that people have kept quiet about, and then to address it subsequently.
So finally, if someone came to you and said, look, I'm thinking of getting into HR, what would be your advice to them?
Don't do it.
Sorry.
No, seriously. It can be very rewarding, but it's also that there are levels of stress with HR that I don't think you anticipate when you go into the role. And like I mentioned earlier, you have people who come to you because they've got very difficult circumstances, personal circumstances or mental health issues. They don't know where to turn, and you suddenly find that you're trying to get them support, you're trying to offer advice, you're trying to work with the manager without disclosing too much. You have to be such a confidant, and you have to be careful how you balance that. And no 2 days are the same. You can't plan your work. You have to be very flexible. You have to be able to think on your feet. And if they're the things you want to do, then it's the great career. But if you want something that's more mundane and more routine, where you understand, and again, you hear people's life stories and you go home thinking about it. You realise how lucky you are, and you compare yourself, and then it's not always easy to switch off at the end of the day. And if that's what you want, then great. It's a great career.
I did say last question. Actually, there's another one. I know a lot of managers undertake the role, the function of HR. In your view, do you think it's worth taking a course, undertaking some training in HR? What's your view?
No, I absolutely agree. It's one thing we're building at the moment, to do a manager's course on managing people, what you can and can't do, what you should and shouldn't do. And I think you're right. I think people do step in, and managers have the potential to make the decisions because they feel they have the autonomy, but without actually having the training or the background to be able to do it. So I do believe that managers should be trained in basic HR, like HR for dummies almost, so they know when and where to use HR. It feels like sometimes HR is the last resort, it should be the first.
Right, okay. Well, thank you very much. I understand before we came, it's not on air, is it? Before we recorded this podcast, you told me that tomorrow is a very special day. And what is that day?
It's International HR Day tomorrow.
Right, well, the timing of this is going to be perfect, isn't it? The timing, the release of this podcast. So, look, thank you very much, Ruby, for giving us an insight into your HR expertise and knowledge, and I hope many people will learn something from it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.